As I continued my research and began presenting it to city council and fellow Houstonians, I noticed there was often a reluctance to believe what I was claiming. Several times, I was asked something along the lines of, "How could something so dangerous be allowed on the market? Doesn't the government regulate this technology?" Once again, the trust of the authorities made people feel like they were safe from harm. Unfortunately, the research shows otherwise. But how could this happen? How can the US government allow potentially hazardous products to be sold and used by millions of people? To understand this, we need to go back to 1996. That year, the Telecommunications Act was passed as an effort to update the law around communications technology as the internet was beginning to come into mass public use. The act was also seen as a way to limit the growing AT&T monopoly. Unfortunately, it was the beginning of further consolidation of telecommunications companies and a huge step towards eroding local power. The 1996 Act prohibits local jurisdictions from considering perceived health effects when taking an action on a proposed facility, such as towers or small cells. Instead, cities and towns could only regulate cell sites based on the aesthetics and location of the devices. Quote, "No state or local government or instrumentality thereof may regulate the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the Commission's regulations concerning such emissions. As long as the facilities comply with the standards set by the FCC, they cannot be subjected to environmental or health regulations." But what happens if those federal standards set by the FCC in 1996 are not adequate? As we will get into shortly, there are studies which show health effects even at the levels allowed by the 1996 Telecommunications Act, not to mention the fact that the standards are over 2 decades old and based on outdated technology. Not only was the Telecom Act designed to protect the profits of the big wireless companies, but somewhere along the way, the FCC and the telecoms developed an incestuous relationship that has overtaken the voices and concerns of the American people. In 2015, the Harvard Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics published an expose by investigative journalist Norm Alster on the financial ties between the US FCC and how, as a result, the wireless industry has bought unfettered access to and power over a major US regulatory agency. The report details how the FCC, an independent government agency created in 1934 to regulate interstate communications by radio, TV, wire, satellite, and cable, has become a captured agency with big wireless leaders filling the government seats in a revolving door fashion. Regarding the passing of the 1996 Telecom Act, Alster writes that, quote, "Late lobbying won the wireless industry enormous concessions from lawmakers, many of them major recipients of industry hard and soft dollar contributions. Congressional staffers who helped lobbyists write the new law did not go unrewarded. 13 of 15 staffers later became lobbyists themselves." Alster states that direct lobbying by industry is just one of many worms in a rotting apple. The report says the FCC is involved in a network of powerful moneyed interests with limitless access and a variety of ways to shape policy. Alster believes the worst part is that the wireless industry has been allowed to grow unchecked and virtually unregulated, with fundamental questions on public health routinely ignored. Unfortunately, the situation goes beyond corrupt government agencies and into actually defaming those who speak out against potential harms caused by wireless technology. During the 1990s, biochemist Jerry Phillips was hired by cell phone giant Motorola to study the effects of the radio frequency radiation emitted by cell phones. Phillips and his colleagues looked at the effects of different radio frequency signals on rats and on cells in a dish. Phillips says the relationship between him and his employer was initially cordial, but soured once he submitted research data to Motorola, which found harmful effects to the DNA structure as a result of exposure to radio frequency radiation. The negative results were not to Motorola's liking, and they began putting pressure on him.
These folks were very, very upset and began to talk about how are they going to handle this, what sort of spin can we put on this, what can we expect from this, and from that point on the relationship changed. What we saw was that Motorola began to exert more and more control over the work, telling us what to do, telling us how to write abstracts, what to say in the abstracts, what to say in the papers. I said, how to do the work. No, don't do this. Yes, do it this way. This was unacceptable. I had completed our study of DNA damage, and I submitted the final report to Motorola, and I got a call from Mays Swycord at Motorola. Now, Mays is the former head of the Center for what is it, CDRH, Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the FDA. And he left the FDA and went to work for Motorola. Keep that connection in mind. That's interesting. He also handpicked his successor at the FDA and tried to urge me not to publish the study. They didn't tell me not to. They just said, no, this isn't ready for publication. And they wanted me to do more work. I stopped taking calls from them, and I went ahead and published the study. It came out in 1998, and I wanted nothing more to do with any Motorola-related work. I wasn't going to put up with that kind of control. I wouldn't put up with that attitude. That was it. I think one has to exercise caution at this point, and what makes the cellular telephone research area so difficult right now is there is no money available for research other than that's coming from industry. So, I mean, what does this do? I don't have any faith in what comes out. I have absolutely none, not with my dealings with industry so far.
In another example of industry attempting to influence research, we have Dr. Henry Lai of the University of Washington and fellow researcher Narendra Singh. The researchers were looking at the effects of non-ionizing radiation, the same type of radiation emitted by cell phones, on the DNA of rats. They used a level of radiation considered safe by FCC standards and found that the DNA in the brain cells of the rats was damaged or broken by exposure to radiation. After publishing the research in 1995, Dr. Lai would later learn of a full-scale effort to discredit the experiments. Lai and Singh caused controversy when they publicly complained about the restrictions placed on their research by their funders, the Wireless Technology Research Program. In response to this public action, the head of the wireless technology research sent a memo asking the University of Washington president Richard McCormick to fire Lai and Singh. McCormick refused, but the message was clear: get rid of anyone who makes our products look bad. In a leaked internal Motorola memo, executives claimed to have succeeded in wargaming the Lai-Singh experiments. This shocked me, Lai says. The letter trying to discredit me, the War Games memo. As a scientist doing research, I was not expecting to be involved in a political situation. It opened my eyes on how games are played in the world of business. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. The pressure is very impressive.
Think about that for a moment. An international corporation trying to exert pressure on scientists who draw conclusions that their product is causing harm to human health. Even further, Dr. Lai's experiments show negative health consequences at levels considered safe by the FCC.
To watch the full film, The 5G Trojan Horse, or download or purchase your copy, visit theconsciousresistance.com/Trojan Horse.